What's up, everybody? It is Friday night. We're talking about Week 12 college football on the Friday night college football show.
Cause I can't wait much longer. I know I got to be right now. Cause I can't get much longer. Man, I've been waiting all night now. That's how long I've been on ya. Let's get lost tonight. You could
Yeah, that's right. It is the InsidersTV Friday night football show, talking college football with my boys, Ben Pritchett and Davis Mattek. Ben Pritchett goes by the name Natural Slugger and does all the college football stuff, and Davis Mattek does our NBA stuff, but he is a college student and a college football daily fantasy baller. Guys, I know it's going pretty good tonight. Davis, I want to start with you, though. Tell us about the night that you've been having.
Okay, well, so earlier this week, I won an entry into the 109 on draft day, the GPP, and then I cashed my voucher out on DraftStreet and entered in the $55 double up. And then Dave wanted me to buy this Ethernet cable, and so he staked me in the 215 double up today. And then I was like, well, I'm already out. I already have like $400 out. So I entered in like 200 head-to-heads across FanDuel and DraftKings. So by tip off, I had probably like 1.2K out today, and that's like the most I've ever had out by like so much money. And about like 5 minutes before tip off, but when lineups locked, I was like freaking out. Like I was in my basement by myself, and I started calling my friends. I was like, we have to do something. Like I can't sit here and watch these games for the first 30 minutes because I was freaking out too hard. And it ended up working out, but I was like I felt all of the money that was like out there. It hurt.
Oh man. Ben, you know about that because you get really anxious about playing high stakes too. People think it's like easy if you have the bankroll, but it's not easy at first because it's a lot of money that you're putting on the line, and you're talking about some people their livelihood, but other people it's like their rent money. And
I have 3 months of rent out tonight, no joke. Now I'm gonna be okay. I'm gonna be okay, but still, like that's a ridiculous thing to think.
Oh gosh, and we certainly don't condone doing that as far as bankroll management. So just don't like double up next time. But is
this about the time that we do a public service announcement for
exactly?
If you need help,
don't do what I did tonight, everyone.
Yeah, so definitely it's definitely though causes some anxiety. Ben, do you want to tell people about when you were at the DraftStreet football championship last year? What you did?
Yeah. I mean, okay, so I won a seat to the DraftStreet football championship, and so I played in the NFL of all things, which I kind of do that in the closet for the most part because I don't really put out that I'm an NFL guy, if that makes any sense. But I won the seat. I go out to Vegas, and it's a great time and everything. And I'm sitting pretty the whole day. It's like me and DP going 1-2 from the get go when we're starting, and then like I fall to third place right as the late games were starting on that Sunday, as we're sitting there kind of watching everything play out, and I started getting sick because I started seeing how $8,000 was about to be lost, or how easy it could be to lose $8,000. So I walked out and went and started playing the slot machines and
lose more money.
No, dude, I had to walk away because I didn't want all these people's celebrations around me, because that's the worst part when you see yourself falling down a leaderboard, and with every fall it's a $2,000 kick, which I can't even imagine the guys that are playing this year when you're talking about first place is $1 million, then you drop down to like 200,000, and then those hits are even harder. So yeah, it was really tough. I'm not built for that for sure.
Do you smoke cigarettes, Ben?
No, I don't, but I thought about it. I actually, they had an open bar. They had an open bar, and I didn't touch a drink of alcohol because I was so afraid that I was going to york into a trash can, and I thought that it would be a little
into a trash can.
Yeah.
Well, I'm trying to quit smoking right now, so when lineups locked, that's all I wanted to do, but I didn't have any cigarettes around, so I was just like, this is the worst feeling ever.
You're coming down off of this big adrenaline, there is nothing like it. I mean, the past two, Wednesday and tonight, there's nothing like getting all those lineups in and then being all of a sudden it just stops and you're like, you just have to kind of come down off it. That's why I love NBA. But Ben, you're right. There's nothing worse than having nobody left to play and having everybody else left chasing you. I'm in kind of that position right now, so I'm glad that I'm doing this show. I want to show people though, real quick.
Are you gonna?
No, I'm gonna show him. I'm gonna show him Davis's score.
Oh, okay. I was like.
So
I finished third in that tournament, by the way, so I didn't fall too far, but it was nerve-wracking.
So you can see our boy Davis is in first place.
There you go, Davis.
That was my first shot with the big boys, man. So that feels pretty good.
Yeah. So good stuff, man. It was fun for me too because I knew. Basically, I told Davis, I said, all right, I can either reimburse you for this Ethernet cord or I can stake you in a 215 and we'll split the profit. And it was fun for me, for the degenerate.
It took me about 3 seconds to ultra be like, no, just stake me.
So, yeah, I mean, that's fun. Let's talk about college football, though. That's what we're here for. That's what people come and watch us for, not just or you guys as beautiful hair, because I really don't have any. As you can see, I've got this one string of hair. I don't even know what it's doing. Who cares? Ben, you had your article today on fantasyinsiders.com. 2 articles, the normal going long. This week you focused on DraftStreet. What is your feeling about DraftStreet this week?
Yeah, it was the hardest I've ever had trying to write one of these articles because I feel like we've entered that moment in the season where the sites have really started to nail the pricing. So it wasn't very easy to really grab value and to really figure out. It became more about the matchups and not necessarily the mistakes in pricing. And so it was really hard for me this week. I struggled, and that's why if you look, the article isn't quite as long because I spent so many hours just trying to bring a rankings into fruition. So yeah, it was really difficult. I'm kind of glad it's over. It's always a relief when we get this thing out and published.
So what are you feeling as far as the site? Are you, as far as DraftStreet goes, are you looking to spend on the quarterback position? Are you looking to go cheap certain places, cheap tight end? Where is the value at? I know you said earlier that it's just very sharp pricing as DraftStreet is known for. They've kind of had certain positions in the past few weeks that have been you can find value in. Are you saying that it's a lot harder to find value at those positions?
No, it's not necessarily harder to find value in the running back and wide receiver positions, but the quarterback position was just extremely difficult for me because I was having trouble with, gauging where Mariota was gonna play. He's $18K and it's a little bit of a discount from what he has been all season. And then you have to deal with Winston and is he dealing with this sex scandal? Has he been dealing with this all year? And he's been kind of struggling to really put up fantasy points over the past couple games. It's not because of him, but it's just been the way it's been. But I mean, it was one of those. It was one of those articles that I spent a lot of time just trying to digest where to slot the right people, and that's probably important because I don't think a whole lot of people read the actual words that I write on these things. I hope they do because I spend a lot of time on it. But it's down to 7,000 words as opposed to almost 10,000. So maybe it's more to the point, but I think you're going to be spending on your quarterbacks for the most part. There are a couple middle tier guys. I'm not a big fan of the cheap quarterbacks on DraftStreet. There are definitely some 11K running backs that I like. So it's the finding the value is going to come in the tight end. It's going to come in into the flex plays and stuff. So. like normal. It's just like NFL for the most part this week.
Wait, are you saying that you don't like Bortles then?
No, I do like Bortles. Bortles
Okay.
is probably going to be my number 2 quarterback. He's my number 1 on the medium price scale. So yes, I do like Bortles a lot.
Blake Bortles, he's. Do you feel comfortable in rostering him in like cash games, or is he a GPP play?
I think he can be both because Temple is that god awful at defense. 322 yards per game passing they're allowing. Bortles is consistent. He actually hasn't gotten to play a defense as bad as Temple. So it'll be interesting to see how well he does with that. He has to struggle with Storm Johnson a little bit stealing the touchdowns, but it's gonna be interesting to see how it plays out for sure. But yeah, he's for matchup wise, he's definitely number 1. And then you have to look at Connor Halliday from Washington State, who throws a god like 60 times a game. So he's a sick play as well. So you could actually build a really good lineup with just Bortles and Halliday, and just bypass all the top tier guys.
I prefer Marquise Williams to Halliday for what it's worth.
Okay, well, it's worth something. Why don't you tell us about Marquise Williams? Obviously, he had a huge week last week. You think he's going to basically duplicate that this week?
Yeah, I was all over him last week. He was the quarterback that I started in all my cash games and GPPs last week. And actually, who are they playing? I totally am spacing right now. Oh, they're playing Pitt. Yeah, no, I'm not worried about that matchup. We've talked about this on the show a bunch. I always prefer the dual threat quarterbacks because they just automatically have that higher floor. And at 11K, I'm gonna run that back, and then you can get Amaro in there, or in a GPP, you can pair him up with Ebron. I definitely prefer that to trying to fit 2 of the higher priced quarterbacks in there. But Petty is really hard to roster as a 23-point favorite over Texas Tech.
Yeah, Ben, your thoughts on some of these high priced quarterbacks? I noticed that you didn't have Petty in your rankings. You're fading him.
Yeah, I guess I am. That Baylor situation has me all kinds of screwed up. The Bryles is actually, he's pissing me off with the way he's wording it in the media, with everybody that's following him and everybody that's writing about this situation is not giving us anything. He said Lake Seastrunk, Glasgow Martin were probable at best, which gives you no idea of if they're going to play. And I think he's putting out a lot of smoke screens. I honestly just what I feel like. I don't think Lake Seastrunk's going to play. I don't think Glasgow Martin's going to play. I think Shock Linwood is going to play. So at the running back position, which means Bryce Petty is a great 20,000 guy for DraftStreet. It's so expensive. And if I have a choice between Bryce Petty or Garrett Gilbert at 20,000, I'm going to go Garrett Gilbert. I know that they have pretty similar lines over the past few weeks, but you've taken out, if you take away Lake Seastruck and you take away Tevin Reese from the Baylor offense, you are taking away 2 huge pieces. I know they're going to replace them with Linwood and probably Norwood at the second wide receiver, but that doesn't give me a whole lot of faith in that Petty is going to be just straight awesome in this game. So I feel better about Gilbert if you're going to go 20K. So yes, I am fading him.
Okay. Let's talk about the over-under in this game before you really devote yourself to fading him, and then we'll get to a question that Sports is Fixed has about one quarterback league. The over-under in this game is pretty high. It's
80 something.
It's 84.5. It's the highest total points, and they are projected at the highest points for a team at 55.5. So that's a pretty big fade. It's not a big fade. I don't think it's a big fade. Okay.
because I like the other guys. If you look through the rankings, I like Norwood. I love Goodley, and I love Shock Linwood. I have Linwood as my number, one or two running back at his tier. So I like those guys. But with Bryce Petty, he's going to have to throw the ball and rush and run the ball in for touchdowns in order for him to do the damage. I mean, how can you be so certain with that? Texas Tech is not that great on defense, but if you gave me a line like 84.5, I would take the under. I'm taking the under on that game at 84.5.
Okay. I mean, again, this is if you feel strongly about it, I just wanted to get you to commit.
Wait.
What Oklahoma State did to Texas Tech. Let's not say that Texas Tech doesn't have that bad of a defense. I think their defense can be pretty bad. You might take the under, and that's not like, I mean, it's an 85 total points, so taking the under isn't a huge stretch. What I'm saying is, fading him is that's what's going to be hard, and I think that what you're saying is that basically his price might be a little too much for his production.
It's just him, though. I'm not fading anybody else. I'm all about risking, the news especially with Shock Linwood. I think Shock Linwood's going to be the bell cow for that offense.
Is he still listed as wide receiver on FanDuel? Because he was like 2 weeks ago.
Shock Linwood?
Yeah.
No, he's expensive too. I think he's like 7,200 on FanDuel. So he's not cheap anywhere anymore.
Okay. I want to get into the other big game as far as Ohio State. Obviously, Carlos Hyde, your boy, made the cover of your article. So I want to get into that real quick, though. A couple of questions. Can you comment on a one quarterback league too? If you could play one quarterback in a cash game that you needed production out of this guy, who would it be? Davis, I'll start with you.
On FanDuel, I've only created like 15 or 20 lineups so far, but it's been Bortles in all of them.
All right.
I did create one with Petty, but I didn't like it very much.
Ben?
Are we talking FanDuel? Is that what we're talking?
Like a one quarterback site like FanDuel.
Or what slate? I mean, I hate to be specific, but all that stuff matters.
Well, just throw out some of the guys that you do. Throw out an early and a late then. Or throw out an early and a top 25 if you want to.
Okay. On the late slate, you can give me one guy. Taylor Kelly.
Okay.
Yeah, just because that kid he's running touchdowns in, he's throwing them. It's a dynamic offense. I like him a lot. Oregon State couldn't stop USC at all last week. I think they allowed like 400 and something yards of offense. And there's no reason to think Arizona State can't do that. If USC can do that, Arizona State can do that. So yeah, there's a lot to love about him. He is priced at 10-2, so he's expensive. So you have to kind of budget accordingly. I wish I could say Fajardo, but he looks like he's not going to play this week, and so.
Also he's terrible. So there's that.
I don't think he's quite terrible.
No, he had the one game, and it suckers me in every week. They had that crazy over/under last week. God damn, I can't talk about it.
You can, and on that late slate too, you can go with Grant Hedrick too, who had 6 touchdowns last week. He's playing Wyoming, and Wyoming's
what I'm
defense.
Doing on the late slate is that dude.
Yeah, he's a dual threat, so of course Davis likes him. So yeah, he's a solid play against Wyoming, who's pretty weak. If you're going for the early slate, I think I'm going Jameis Winston in that slate on FanDuel. He's a little bit cheaper at 9,800. Syracuse is pretty bad against all passing games, and I think he's going to have something to prove. Right? I mean, Mariota has pulled himself pretty much out of Heisman contention, so it's going to be between Manziel and Winston. going forward, in my opinion. So if Winston's going to win the Heisman, he has to start now. And this may be a little bit of a tougher game for Florida State. I have no idea. Florida State hasn't had a tough game all year. They won by 2+ touchdowns in every single game. So we'll see. But I think the ineptitude of Syracuse will give Winston opportunities to score through the air. And what's crazy about Winston is that we haven't seen all year. The guy can run. He can run, and we haven't seen it all year. So he is a dual threat, but they just don't use him that way. And he also throws 95 miles per hour for the baseball team.
He also is involved in a lot of scandal
in charity. Yeah.
So
yeah, I have you read the actual allegations and things that behind that? It doesn't look very good. That's why he hasn't been charged with anything, because it's not quite like a Vandy crime. It's pretty evident that he didn't do this.
Oh, it is evident.
Don't put me on record as saying that, but from what I've read, it doesn't look like he did it.
Well, Ben doesn't think he did it, so he's fine.
Well, Ben is judge and jury on this one.
Not guilty.
There's the Ohio State game against Indiana. Obviously, you want to start anybody who goes against Indiana. Pretty much, their defense is terrible, right?
It's Illinois.
Or Illinois. That's what I meant. Indiana was the team that put it on Illinois. So, your thoughts about Ohio State? Can you roster who all can you roster? Can you roster Philly Brown? Can you roster anybody else other than Braxton and Carlos Hyde?
Go to Davis first on this one. I want to hear his opinion.
Davis,
I'm not rostering Braxton Miller. I am rostering Carlos Hyde in like all the cash games. I think you probably shouldn't play him in a GPP because he's gonna be like 75% owned in like the $5 GPP on DraftStreet probably, because he's sort of outside of that elite pricing tier where he's only like 12% of the cap. Yeah, he's gonna be crazy owned. And I think Hyde's going to get those rushing touchdowns. The emergence of Hyde has sort of killed Braxton's fantasy value to me.
Ben?
Yeah, so when we're looking at DraftStreet, I gave this a really hard look because obviously I knew Carlos Hyde was going to be my top running back. I'm with Davis on that. He has to be rostered. He's 11K on DraftStreet, so he's going to be nearly 70% owned. I'm just assuming if you don't have Carlos Hyde at 70+%, you're stupid, because I mean, Illinois has allowed 4 200-yard rushers this year. They've had three games where they have allowed the second string running back to rush nearly 100 yards. The second string running back. There's been, I think, 4 games. Don't necessarily quote me on this, where they've approached 300 yards rushing as teams have just come up against them and just killed them. I mean, granted, they've played some tough running backs. They've played Abdullah and Cross. They've played Sankey. They've played who else have they played? Belton, who put up 200 yards. I mean, 200 yards from Belton, 200 yards plus from, I think it was 225 from Abdullah. They 200 yards plus from Sankey. Last week against Coleman, they let him rush for 200 yards. I mean, we're talking about a gold mine for running backs. If they play Illinois, you have to play them. But what I think is interesting about Braxton Miller, and that people are probably missing, is Braxton Miller is Ohio State's number 2 running back. He is. He gets 14 to 20 carries a game. He's going to run the ball. So if you automatically translate as Hyde's going to get his 200 yards, okay, I'm fine with that. I think that's probably going to happen. Then you got to assume that Braxton Miller is going to be the guy that's going to benefit from the leftover rushing yards that they're going to give up. I mean, that may be a little bit too much of a transitive property for some people to be comfortable with, but I like it enough to where I'm rostering both at the same time. I think that's why I have them both as number 1 plays this week.
I like it. So one person says not to start Braxton Miller. The other person says to start him. And the thing we can all agree on is start Carlos Hyde. So Braxton Miller, his price it's lower than what it has been just because he hasn't had those big games. But he's a guy that could definitely put up some big numbers. I just don't know. I'm looking at him. He's 17,000 on DraftStreet. That's a lot. I mean, that's a lot, and I feel like there might be some middle tier quarterbacks that you might be able to take. I know that there's a lot of points that are going to be scored in this game.
Okay.
And so I know that there's going to be plenty of touchdowns to go around. They're projected at 50 points. Carlos Hyde or Jeremy Johnson? Carlos Hyde?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Teammate Sports says both. Let's talk about the Blake Bell. Do you think Blake Bell is a guy that you could roster on a site like DraftStreet? Let's Davis, you're the big Oklahoma fan. He's 10K on DraftStreet.
No, they lost to Texas. They don't deserve my affection for the rest of the season. Like, that's sort of the rule. If you lose to Texas, they get nothing but open consternation for every. And I follow a couple Sooners like bloggers, and the whole team is in upheaval right now. Stoops and the assistant coaches are disagreeing. They have a couple freshmen who got arrested for aggravated battery the other day. They've played 3 quarterbacks. There's been talk about this true freshman getting in some snaps. They're bringing in Trevor Knight in the red zone. It's just a mess. It is just a mess. And I know the matchup is juicy. Iowa State really sucks. Bell in a GPP for sure. Yeah. But he will be in 0 of my cash game lineups. You just can't do it, because even though he theoretically should be a good runner, they never let him do it.
Ben?
Yeah. I mean, I'm with Davis on this one, believe it or not. I had Blake Bell kind of in the preliminary rankings, but as I started to weed people out, I like to try to put a few extra guys, and he was one of the extra guys that kind of got yanked as I did more research. It's not necessarily because of his abilities, as much as I think I'm with Davis in that he can run the ball, and they don't use him as a runner. And when they have used him as a runner, they've been pretty successful. If you look back to where he first came on the scene, and when they ran the ball with him a little bit, when he was getting 10 plus carries, every game he's gotten 10 plus carries, they've won against, Tulsa, Notre Dame, TCU, and Kansas. Every one of those games they won. And he has had a rushing touchdown, which, if I remember right, the kid ran for a ton of touchdowns last year. Did he not? So
yeah, he ran for like 10 last year.
Yeah, I don't know what they're doing right now. And I know they have a lot of senior running backs. They have Damian Williams, Clay, and Roy Finch, which
Trey
really
Miller.
And Trey Miller. So it's really getting complicated when you try to peg the right one for a GPP, because whoever's going to run the ball against Iowa State's going to do well. It's just nailing the right guy. I mean, obviously you have to just go ahead and assume it's going to be Damian Williams, but that's not necessarily the case. He's not the most dynamic runner they have, but he's definitely the one that's getting the most carries. Blake Bell for me isn't on my screen, my blip screen right now.
Radar. It's called a radar.
Can I not call it a blip screen?
I'm not sure anyone ever says he's not on my blip screen.
It's an airport term, right?
Well, I mean, it's basically as a radar, correct? It's not like you can say, well, he's not on my fish finder.
Yeah, that's not the scientific term for it, Ben.
Anyways, you're right. Teammate Sports says, are we playing Call of Duty? He has 0 rushing touchdowns this year, which is kind of, I mean, it is frustrating for a guy that can run the ball. The one thing, obviously he had a rough go of it against Baylor, but at Texas Tech he had 44 yards rushing, Kansas 53 yards rushing, TCU 61 yards, Notre Dame 59 yards. So he can it is totally possible for him to get 6 points on the ground. And at 10K on DraftStreet, I think he is a middle tier guy that I might want to roster, because against bad teams, he's been okay against bad defenses. And that's something that he's going to go up against this week, is a bad defense. So they're projected at 37 points. There's going to be, I think he can throw for 2 or 3 touchdowns and get yards. I think that he's a guy that has a high upside and maybe a low floor, but he has a high upside. I mean, could you see 4 touchdowns against Iowa State? I could. So, but I mean, you don't have to play him.
He's due for a rushing.
Yes,
he's due for a rushing touchdown too, isn't he?
He is due. If you don't believe in independent
that
events,
is not a thing.
if you don't believe in independent events, he is due. The rule of large numbers. Ben, let's hear though some middle tier quarterbacks that you'd rather have, maybe other than Blake Bell in that price range.
Well, according to my rankings, Blake Bell would classify as a lower tier running back, and if you're going to put him as a lower tier guy, I'd say he's viable. Yeah, we talked about Bortles, we talked about Holiday. Brendan Kay is another really solid option that people are probably going to overlook, and I got to be honest, I initially overlooked him as well when I was kind of doing my rankings. I added him after I took out Blake Bell. Because when I ran through, first thing I do when I look at the slate, I see who everybody's playing, and then I kind of run through who are the worst defenses. And because at this point in the season, we kind of know who's really bad at doing something, and Rutgers is really, really, really bad at defending the pass. And so, you automatically look at who they're playing, and they're playing Cincinnati, and I've been a fan of Brendan Kay since day one. I like McClung, their wide receiver, Anthony McClung, a lot, but I only like him with Brendan Kay. I don't like him with Munchie Legault because I don't think Munchie Legault is very good. And Munchie Legault went out with a knee injury early on in the season. Brendan Kay has been throwing for something seriously awesome, like 80% over the last 3 or 4 games. Seriously awesome. And so, when you take a guy that's throwing for 80%, and he's going to run up against a defense like Rutgers, which he should be just salivating in, which if you look at Cincinnati's schedule over the last 6 games, they have just been having the most gift-wrapped schedule that you've ever seen. Like, we're talking about playing teams that haven't won a game every single week. And, they're running against Rutgers, who's playing a little bit better lately, but the defense is shot. We talked about a couple weeks ago how they're putting in backup wide receivers as corners, and it's just pathetic. And so they're number 2, only behind Idaho at defending quarterbacks. So they're giving up 300 yards and 2.7 touchdowns to quarterbacks. So I love that kind of matchup. He is 12-3, so he's a little bit more than middle tier, which you would classify as middle tier. But for DraftStreet, I think that's middle tier. Other than that, I don't see any other guys. Bridgewater's doesn't have a too terrible a matchup because I think that Bridgewater has a lot to prove. He still has a lot to prove going into the NFL draft, in my opinion. He's throwing the ball extremely well. If you've watched any of Louisville's games, you would understand that his stats aren't really indicative of how well he's playing. It's an indictment of how bad the play calling is and how bad his receivers are.
Well, there you go. We are indicting him, or indicting his receivers
and his coaches.
Devil Ball 420 says, "Would you risk starting Casey Cochran, the quarterback or the player for Connecticut, on DraftStreet?"
I when I put him in these rankings, I was really excited, and here's how I explained it. I think Kalani was the one that messaged me on Twitter. I think he's a Connecticut fan. I'm not sure, UConn fan. But when I was looking at it and I found him at 2.9K, I immediately got excited because I know for you, David, you love to roster these quarterbacks that are so cheap.
He does. He always does that. Every time I see him on a leaderboard, he's got some 4K quarterback I didn't even know was playing.
Yeah, he loves to roster this kind of quarterback. And if you look at just the matchup and you look at the price, you have to fall in love with this kid. I mean, there's just no getting around it. But the fact that UConn is a mess, they do have really good wide receivers. Shaquem and Jeremy are both really good wide receivers. So it's not impossible to think that he could throw for 2+ touchdowns. And if he does that, if he throws for 2+ touchdowns at 3K, he's going to open up your whole DraftStreet roster for Andre Williams, for Kadeem Carey, for Carlos Hyde, for Shock Linwood. I mean, you can really roster all these guys and Jordan Matthews and, other guys and just chock full your lineup full of studs. And so, yeah, it's really tempting. A GPP play, definitely go for it. But I mean, cash games, you have to really be on your game to do that. I don't back that.
It's going to be a GPP play for sure. Skyler Morningweg's son is going to be starting versus South Carolina. He's at 4.3. One word, Pritchett. Yes or no? Would you start Morningweg over Cochran?
No.
Okay, Davis.
No.
I would agree. I mean, you've got SMU and you've got South Carolina, so I would definitely take Cochran, and he's a guy. You look at some of these studs like Kadeem Carey. We're fixing to talk about running, but fixing to. That's my Southern coming out. We're about to talk about running. I don't even know running backs. But before that, Ben, I just want to say that I see you have Jalen Whitlow. He's at 10.9. Do you want to put it on the board as far as Blake Bell versus Jalen Whitlow? Because I think you're absolutely smoking crack. I will be at that game tomorrow, and I would love to have a little bit of extra on it.
Versus Blake Bell, really, Blake Bell. Can we put him against somebody else?
No, they're the same price range, and you don't have Blake Bell rostered or ranked. So I want to see.
Are we doing fantasy points? Just fantasy points, or what are we doing?
No, we're doing efficiency rating. Yes, we're doing fantasy points.
That's all. Let's go. Yeah, I'll do it. What are we talking about? Let's do an embarrassing bet because you still haven't cashed in on the bet at the beginning, and I haven't cashed in on our bet last week.
I found an embarrassing picture. My sister posted a picture of me and Bye Bye Birdie on Instagram the other day. So you need to go find that if you want me to have it as my picture. Okay. But I mean, I'm so confident that I don't know. What's an embarrassing bet, Davis?
I don't know what Ben would be embarrassed about, and we've already done the picture thing.
I don't know how to take that, Davis.
I mean, we both just told stories about like gambling on fantasy sports making us nervous. So
when you admit to peeing in a bottle on a live
exactly.
Dignity
We now call that Pritchetting. So like, I don't really know what's more embarrassing than that.
Okay.
Yeah, good point.
Let's just. We don't have to put any money down. Let's just do double or nothing on the picture bet because I'm pretty sure that I'm going to win this one.
Okay, let's do it. I mean, we'll come up with something.
Yeah,
we'll come up with something.
But you are off your rocker with a Whitlow call. I don't
think I am.
I don't do the show with lipstick on. Yes.
Boom.
Yes.
Yeah.
Either one of us.
I like that.
Dude, it already looks like I wear lipstick anyway.
Well, it would be even more. I will pay for the lipstick color too and have it sent to you. You would look like who's Jamie Foxx on Living Color? What was the character's name? LaWanda? Was it LaWanda
it was something like that.
I'm gonna rock y'all world.
Do I have to apply it myself or can I get my wife to apply it is what I'm wondering.
No, you have to apply it yourself. You have to apply it yourself. You cannot get your wife to do it.
Shoot.
Shanae.
Shanae.
So yeah, that is what we'll do. Let's move on to the running back position. Who are some running backs that you guys like right off the board? Davis, we'll start with you.
I mean, I really like Dallas Crawford in that matchup versus Duke. He's pretty cheap. I like Malcolm Brown for Texas now that he sort of has that backfield to himself. Carlos Hyde, obviously. Kadeem Carey priced down a little bit, and for GPP's Melvin Gordon, because if he's gonna be Melvin Gordon again, I would say that this is probably the matchup to do it with that high over under.
Yeah, I definitely like Brown. Ben, is he a must play for you?
Nearly. Yeah, the fact that he's got that backfield all to himself against Oklahoma State is Davis is right on the head on that one. It's a very alluring matchup, even at 9.2K. What's his price on FanDuel? I'm not necessarily sure.
He's like I was just on there. I think he's like 6'5" on FanDuel.
Yeah. At 6'5", you nearly have to roster him on FanDuel.
Real quick before I forget, Paul James is healthy in that game, and he was a stud before he got hurt. I haven't seen anything about him this week. How do you feel about him?
Yeah, see, I thought about ranking Paul James. I knew that he was coming back this week, but the fact of the matter is if you look at Paul James's stats, which I did, he did all those really awesome games against defenses we now know suck. So if you look back at his big 180-yard games, it was against Fresno, Norfolk State, Eastern Michigan, which we have now realized all those teams are awful against the run.
Yeah.
So, he's missed defenses that are slightly better. Going up against Cincinnati, Cincinnati's defense proved last week that they are studly, even though they let SMU score a lot of fantasy points. They shut them down. I don't know if anybody was paying attention to that game. Fantasy wise, yeah, they did okay, and maybe I was too stupid for fading that game. But if you look at the actual way that game played out, Cincinnati ruled that whole game. So I don't think Rutgers is going to have much of a chance in this one. I think it's going to be a pretty easy game for Cincinnati.
Storm Johnson, is he a guy? I mean, it seems like running back might be the value play here on DraftStreet. That's why I might want to go cheap at running back, because you've got these guys, not only Kadeem Carey, who, I mean, he has one touchdown the past 2 weeks. I think he gets back. I mean, the school has finally opened up to promoting him for Heisman, which we've talked about before can be a big thing. He had to get some off-the-field issues cleared up first. So with that kind of being gone and them actually promoting the hashtag, whatever it is, for Kadeem for Heisman, and then you have some of these other players that are under, they're not the 17K they have been in the past. You have Storm Johnson, Mike Davis against Florida, but Malcolm Brown, another guy, DeAnthony Thomas against Utah. It seems like, Ben, these rankings of running backs, it seems like you can go cheap on quarterback and then just lay the wood with some of these running backs.
Yeah, that's the strategy that we talked about earlier. If you run the 11K wide receiver or the 11K running, sorry, the 11K, the 11K quarterbacks, then it opens up your checkbook to really pay for all these other wide receiver or running backs. Good Lord. So yeah, when you talk about DeAnthony Thomas, he's kind of that guy that we saw really show his stuff early on in the season, and then he got hurt, and Byron Marshall kind of took that main running back job over. And now DeAnthony Thomas, I think he's healthy now. He's really being active in the passing game.
Yeah, he's kind of playing wide receiver now, which probably is better for his draft stock, honestly. So I wouldn't be surprised to see that continue. I'm off him this week.
That's what he was last year. I'm with Davis. I put him in the rankings. He's not necessarily going to be in my teams. I think I might be more inclined to roster a Dallas Crawford or run into the cheap guys like Shock Linwood at 7'6" or Shad Thornton at 5'9". Because if you look at Shad Thornton, Brandon Mitchell looks questionable for that game, which I wrote about in the article. He is the only other threat to the carries for Thornton. And if Mitchell misses this game, you're going to look for a lot of carries out of Thornton. Thornton's averaged over 100 yards for the past 4 games. So at 5'9", if you can get a running back that can rush for 100 yards, that's solid. And then also Christian Powell, who started last game for Colorado, looks like he's taken the job back from Adkins, which some people might be missing. So if you're looking for a really cheap running back play to kind of fill the gaps, if Powell is starting, which it looks like he is, he's facing Cal, who's not very good against the run, not very good against the pass. They're just a terrible defense altogether. So it's the truth. And so if you run Powell out there at 3.7K, you're not really risking a lot, and it opens up the ability to roster the Kadeem Carey and Hyde in the same, and then put in Linwood too. I love that kind of formation as you're building your running backs.
Yeah. Another running back that you have listed, Jaron Seymour. He's a running back for Vanderbilt. I'm trying to look up some news on him right now. last week he actually didn't look that great, and you had Brian Kimbrough, who's getting more touches, which is kind of surprising. Kimbrough is a guy who is one of the top running backs out of the country out of Memphis, and has just been an absolute head case. He's a small back, kind of in that Anthony Thomas mold, really fast. I would probably advise people, though, to kind of hold that thought on Kimbrough. Also, on a site like DraftKings, Patton Robinette's 2,500. Check tomorrow the news. It's an early game, so the game starts at 11 or 11:20 Central Time. Check the news to see if Austin Carter Samuels is starting. If he's starting, it would bump up Jordan Matthews for sure. If he's not starting, Patton Robinette is minimum salary playing Kentucky on DraftKings, and I think he's a guy that you have to play over on DraftKings to get all those studs in there. I checked on the Vandy Sports message board, the Rivals Vanderbilt site, and someone asked how much of a chance Austin Carter Samuels has tomorrow, and basically everybody's saying that nobody knows but the coaching staff. So for what it's worth, there you have it. I'm sure, though, with that game starting right at lineups lock time, that you're going to have some news on who's in and who's out. Let's talk about some of the cheap running backs. Who do you like as a cheapie on DraftStreet, Pritchett?
Cheap running backs? Yeah, we talked about them. Thornton and Powell are pretty much my two top filler running backs. But if you're looking at the 7K range, I like Linwood, and then we talked about Linwood. If we really look at this Baylor game, we talked about how 84 points. Even if I'm taking the under, there's going to be a lot of points scored in that game. And even if Lake Seastrunk is playing, I still like Linwood. Now, if Seastrunk and Glasgow Martin are playing, then you can kind of downgrade Linwood. But if you look at Linwood's stats, his stats are so freaking good.
Once he gets to garbage time, they don't use Glasgow or Seastrunk at all. It's all Linwood.
Yeah, and the question is, are they going to get to garbage time in this game? And the Texas Tech is a crazy team in that we don't know who's even going to be the starting quarterback for them. Because last week they benched Davis Webb at halftime for Baker Mayfield, and that even affected my wide receiver rankings because I like Eric Ward with Davis Webb. I don't know if I like him as much with Baker Mayfield. And they don't even know what they're doing offensively. They just know they have a really good system in place and that it will eventually score points. Is that funny to you?
They don't know what they're doing. They just know they have a good offensive system in place.
And it just can't. That system came out of nowhere.
No, I'm not saying that it came out of nowhere, but they have no.
Just go long.
They have no idea what they're doing with the quarterback situation. I mean, they have two freshman quarterbacks that they're kind of battling as to who is the guy, and Webb struggled for just a half last week.
Yeah, well, one of them has an awesome name, and the other one sucks. So the decision is clear.
Which one's suck?
Davis.
Oh, Davis sucks. Oh, Davis.
There we go.
Okay.
They all have last names for everything. Davis, Webb, Baker, Mayfield. How nice would it be, though, if you had a walk-on freshman quarterback like Davis Webb come? Even though he's struggled a little bit, he's a walk-on. That's pretty awesome. There's no way that all three of those quarterbacks stay for next year. One of them definitely is leaving to go to greener pastures. You're not going to see all three of them stay. I don't think so. As far as if you're going cheap running back or cheap wide receiver for that flex position on DraftStreet, Ben, what would you choose?
Sorry, what was
Cheap
the question again? I was
back,
answering in the chat.
Cheap wide receiver. What would you choose for that flex spot?
Well, it's a PPR site. DraftStreet is. So I would do both. I think when I was kind of making my mock-up lineups, I had one flex that was cheap running back, and I had one flex that was a cheap wide receiver. So I hate to be kind of wishy-washy with my answer, but that's kind of how it ran out. I have Linwood on all my teams, so I guess I have two cheap running backs if you go by my rankings.
Davis?
Shadrick Thornton for me. I like the matchup and Mitchell being out there. But yeah, also Shock Linwood. Both of those are good. I'm using Ben's boy Levi Norwood though, and like my flex and all of them because I always like to spend on wide receiver ever since you and I talked and Ben was like, yeah, they've done studies showing that more wide receivers win GPPs, and like that was always just a little nugget that stuck with me. So I always like to have at least 3 wide receivers in GPPs.
It's a lot easier for them to get
200 total yards and 3 touchdowns.
50-yard pass rather than having to run through 6 or 7 guys to get a 50-yard touchdown run. So, I mean, I think that it's definitely it just depends on cash versus GPP, which we've talked about. I want to talk real quick about the guys over there at Lou Dogs. Great guys, Davis. I know you're involved with the forums there. We're going to be doing.
Yeah, I check those every morning, man. Seriously, if you guys aren't doing that, you're kind of messing up.
So basically, if you go to ludogs.com and you can sign up, and they have the forums, and they have there's just a lot of strategy talk there, which is one of the reasons why I like them. So if you haven't checked out Ludogs yet, make sure that you are checking those guys out because it's a good site for research and just to kind of no one's really it's research and everybody's trying to help each other because daily fantasy is growing, it's getting larger. So not if you have a 500-person tournament, not all 500 people are going to be in that thread, but you are going to have a lot of people that love to research and you can run ideas off of, and there's a lot of nuggets in there, like you talked about earlier. So those are good friends at Ludogs, ludogs.com. Let's move on to wide receiver.
Can I say one more cheap running back?
Before we move on to wide receiver, Davis, I want you to give us one cheap running back.
Steven Houston, who is Tevin Coleman's backup. If Coleman doesn't go tomorrow, they have that. They just like. That backfield's been really productive, and Houston was the starter before Coleman took the job from him. But he would have all of the work to himself, and that's pretty sweet. Looks like Ben doesn't agree with me, so let's hear why.
I mean, they're playing Wisconsin in Wisconsin, so for me that's he's 72.
30 touches is 30 touches, man. At 7K,
is he gonna get 30 touches if they're getting blown out?
Uh-oh, we got the high-pitched voice from Ben.
Oh,
there should be like a high-pitched voice meter that like how strongly he feels about something, because he definitely goes into high-pitch mode whenever he feels strongly. So it sounds like he doesn't think there's going to get 30 touches, but definitely a strong GPP play. Going up against those big nasties out in Wisconsin, I understand. What's his price tag on DraftStreet?
7,200.
72. So yeah, GPP play for sure. Not taking him in cash games.
Well, good. I'm glad that you're not. 2,500.
That remember we talked about GPP play sometimes means just sucky ass play.
Okay, well, I don't do that. I don't use GPP play as a way to tell someone I don't like their pick. when I say GPP play, it means that I'm personally rostering them in one.
Woo! You rostering Steven Houston in one of your GPP plays.
Yeah, I can screen share with you right now if you want me to.
No, we don't. Don't show us your lineup. You've already been doing pretty good with this. You don't want. You're on a heater. Keep it on the heater.
I like it, Davis. You do it, man. It's not a bad play. I mean, I know it's probably going to bite me. He's going to run for 200 yards or something stupid.
Well, remember the last time you took me to task was when Tanner Price was at 4K, and for a 4K quarterback, he went off for 49 fantasy points.
Boom. Eat it.
But
real quick.
See what Wisconsin?
We have to get Ben. I don't want to cut you off because I know you love to have the last word. But we have a question.
That's the problem.
Thoughts on Aaron Green, likely starting running back for TCU? Bad matchup, but great price. Only 2,500 on DraftStreet. Seems like it could be a sexy play. What do you guys say?
Yeah, I mean, that's news to me.
You're saying that you don't have a clue, which is okay to say. In college football,
I got burnt by Catalan last week. Plus, I also know that they're going to be playing about 5 minutes from my apartment, and everyone in Manhattan is jazzed for this game, man. I think K-State just murders TCU tomorrow. I don't even looked at the line in that game because I'm not going to be rostering anyone. But I would bet K-State if any of you out there are gambling people.
I know who he is. I know who he is. I actually looked at this a little bit because when I was starting to go back and forth on when I reported a couple weeks, like last week, I believe, that one of the running backs is suspended. The other one is injured. I think, who is it that's injured? Catalon's injured. Wayman James is suspended. And Wayman James is suspended indefinitely. So, yeah, Kansas defense has been playing a little bit better lately. And but I like Jordan Moore as the better back of the two. As I was doing some research, I kind of avoided this play. If you're going to punt, go punt with Christian Powell. Don't punt at 2K, in my opinion. If you're going to punt at 3.9K. Pay the extra $2,000 and deal with it. But yeah, one of these guys.
You don't need to go crazy cheap because you're not going to roster Cooks this week, so there's not a position player that's going to bankrupt you anywhere.
Exactly. I mean, unless you're rolling like extremely expensive in your quarterbacks and extremely expensive in your running backs, you're really not going to need to go that cheap with any of these like plays. I mean, this isn't NFL, so you can figure it out.
However, this is the type of play that I like to do, and you know this, Ben. You know that especially if someone's starting and they're really low salary and it's going to open up some salary relief, I'd probably rather go Cochran, the quarterback for UConn. But if someone, I mean, I'm looking at these quotes. Wayman James going to be suspended because of violating team rules. Catalan, they don't know if he's going to start or not, but basically he said that right now Green is the starter. That's what Gary Patterson, TCU coach, says. And last week he had 72 yards against Iowa State, and I know Iowa State's different than Kansas State, but still, I mean, if you get 7 points, and heaven forbid he gets a touchdown, and you get like 13 points, 15 points, and you're only at 2,500 on DraftStreet, that allows you to go either cheap at tight end or play a more reliable tight end and then go just nuts everywhere else. But it allows you a lot of flexibility with your lineup. And I am all about flexibility with lineup construction, roster construction. So I don't have a problem with it. But I want to talk real quick, though, about tight end. We're already an hour into the show. And we haven't even covered wide receivers or tight ends. So let's talk about...
People are just there along for the ride, man.
But Jordan Moore has the Georgia state record in hurdles. I just Googled that, and I'm like, this is worth talking about.
Ben loves running backs that have done track at some point in their life. That's like
I definitely
that is his jam.
Hey, if you look at Kalfani Muhammad, I know I got a lot of hits from that, but if you've looked every single week since then, I think he scored a touchdown.
He has. So yeah. the 1 week I needed him, he got -6. So thanks, Ben.
Yeah, but he's been great since then.
Tight ends.
There is a tight end nugget that needs to be dropped.
Whoa.
Drop the nugget.
Seriously.
Drop the nugget.
Pittsburgh is 125th in the nation at fantasy points allowed to tight ends. The only team that has given up more fantasy points to tight ends is Miami of Ohio. So, yeah, you're playing Ebron over Amaro. I know that sounds crazy to say, but yeah. Especially on FanDuel where Ebron is cheaper. Maybe not on DraftStreet where they're like the exact same price. But I'm getting in Ebron and I'm stacking him with Williams instead of Quinshaw Davis. That's the nugget.
Ben, thoughts on the nugget?
No, it's a good nugget. That's why I have Ebron as my number 2 tight end. I think I pointed those kind of same facts out. But I have Funchess as my number 1, so I'm going a little bit off the board and running with the 7.7K tight end with Funchess. I just liked his big playability, and I think that Northwestern is a little bit beat up, and I think that Michigan's difficulties with running the football and protecting the quarterback is going to come to a head. Now, whether that actually means that Funchess is going to have a great game or not, I don't know, but I do know that Gardner is looking to Gallen and he's looking to Funchess. I pointed this out last week. I think it was something like 80% of his throws are going to Funchess or Gallen. So if you're going to look, I like looking at tight ends that are going to get a quarterback that's going to throw the ball to him, target him a lot. With Ebron, you're looking at a guy that Marquise Williams targeted him a lot last week, but it didn't seem like they could connect very easily. If you look at Marquise Williams, every time that he's been in the game, he is lit up with Quinshaw Davis. Now, I don't have Quinshaw Davis ranked in any of these rankings, but it just seems like they have a really good chemistry, and Ebron they don't quite have the same kind of chemistry. I think that could change this week, obviously, with Pitt sucking against tight ends. So, yeah, I mean, for me, it's Funchess and then Ebron and then Amaro. So, for DraftStreet.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think there's any problem with that. Any other cheap players that you might, if you have to punt, who are you looking at?
What do we classify as punt? I always wonder about that when
4K.
I'm looking at. Okay. Yeah, that's Gerald Christian and Connor Hamlet. I think you can just kind of roll the dice on either one of those guys, or you can use both and just kind of figure out which one as you're making multiple lineups, because I know you love to do that, Mr. Kitchen.
Wait, you don't make multiple lineups, Ben?
No, I'm a single lineup. I'm a single lineup guy.
Why? Where's the fun in that?
You know, I made multiple lineups last week on FanDuel because I played like 2 different slates, and it actually worked out for me because I made a Marquise Williams, Capri Bibbs, and Tevin Coleman lineup that was pretty sweet, and it actually saved my ass because I lost pretty big because I kind of faded Bibbs on all my other teams. So so it does work out as a safety net sometimes, but yeah,
it's called hedging, man.
yeah, I know you both preach about it, but
to hedge.
I
know
know
what Ben's multi-lineup is, though, Davis?
What, like switching out like the tight end or something?
Ben's multi-lineup is ranking players because he can rank all of his top players, and then if someone goes off, he can say,
I ranked him 4th.
I had him. He was on my list. No. And he doesn't have to make – that's what's rough about daily fantasy is translating the ranks into value and like having to make those tough decisions. That's always – it always separates the wheat from the chaff. So there you have it. Finally, let's get into wide receivers. Must play wide receiver for you, Davis, and then Ben will follow it up with you later.
Oh, it's got to be Goodley. Every head-to-head, every 50-50, every GPP, you got to do it. Because, we've been saying all season, Reese Goodley. Well, now it's just Goodley, and he's just going to eat.
Ben, who is going to eat for you?
Jordan Matthews. You're going to the game. He likes to eat. And
is Dave bringing food?
Well, I don't know. I've never been invited to one of these Vandy games with David, so I don't know what that's all about.
Not true. I don't know if you remember.
No, that's bull crap.
We went to the Georgia game together when we were like 12 or 13. Do you not remember that? There was a fake punt that we did that the Vanderbilt fans still talk about. Vanderbilt was winning the first half and then attempted a fake punt at our own 20-yard line. That was same old Vanderbilt, and Georgia came back and won.
Was that with DiNardo as the coach?
Yeah.
Was that?
Was with said DiNardo as the coach. That's when we all got burnt half of our faces. I think I was 12 or 13, but it's a written rule. I mean, I sit, and Vanderbilt fans are kind of known for sitting on their hands, but our section is like the sidewalk alumni, what we call ourselves, because we weren't smart enough or rich enough to get into Vandy. But we're kind of crazy. It's just against the rules to bring in another fan into the stands, in your section. I cannot stand when people bring like, oh, you're a Georgia fan? You should come to the Georgia game with me. We can sit next to each
I,
other, and I can watch you yell up and down while your team does good, and I get frustrated. Not everyone around me gets frustrated. It is like it's not even a Vandy football rule, Insider Fantasy. It is like a college football rule. You cannot bring other opposing fans into the stadium and sit in the home section with you. You just can't do it. Unwritten rule, you can't do it.
But I can go to a Kentucky game. I mean, I have a Vanderbilt shirt. I can wear a Vanderbilt shirt to a Kentucky game.
Would you cheer for Vanderbilt?
Yes, of course I would.
Okay.
What do I have to cheer for with Kentucky? They
okay.
Then
Then
although now we have the lipstick bet, so maybe I would kind of cheer for Jalen Whitlow. So yeah, it's probably not a good idea now.
I'm thinking a nice glittery gold on you would be
No, we talked about lipstick, not lip gloss.
amazing. Something really outlandish, something that's going to make your eyes sparkle for sure. Wide receiver Jordan Matthews, though, like I said, if Patton Robinette is a starter, he still is a good play against that Kentucky defense. If Curtis Samuels is able to go and is able, I mean, they're not going to clear him unless he's 100%. But even if he's like 80 or 90%, I mean, it's Jordan Matthews is going to, how we like to say in the hood, eat.
Yeah, he's 11.5K as opposed to 13.7 or 13.8 for Goodley too. So
and it's a PPR site, and he's beginning. He even with Robinette, he still has been getting a lot of targets. Maybe last week wasn't the case, but they were able to run the ball off of all those turnovers that Florida had. So it's a little different. We're going to. I think that Vanderbilt is going to have a pretty good game plan. They're coming off two big wins, Florida and Georgia. This is not a letdown game. This is a game. Vanderbilt in the past, they haven't lost a game in November for the past 2 years, which is huge for Vanderbilt. That hasn't been the MO at all. Mav says Trey Mason ? Ben, your thoughts on Trey Mason?
You're hitting it home with Trey Mason right here. If there's always a slight bias to my rankings, I've been honest about that. I don't like to rank guys against Georgia. Honestly, if you look at how Georgia's played lately, they've been a lot better against the pass than they have been against the run, and Auburn is practically abandoned the pass. They've thrown for like 15 passes over the past 2 games. So, for me, it's kind of like Georgia's going to load the box and make Nick Marshall beat them in the pass. If they're smart, that's what they're going to do. David gets on to me about trying to play the coach. But in this situation, I think that I'm right. I think Rick is smart enough to where he's not going to let Trey Mason and Nick Marshall rush for 400 yards or whatever like they did against Vanderbilt. So it's going to be interesting to see how they handle this game. I like Sammy Coates because I think that Nick Marshall's going to have to throw the ball to be successful.
You do like Sammy Coates? He was a guy I haven't been able to decide on all week.
No,
I want to put him in because his price on FanDuel is sweet.
No, what is he on FanDuel? Is he
He's
under
like 5? No, he's like 5'2". So he's right in that range where you can get Goodley in like no problem.
That's kind of how he's been for the past couple weeks because he's a big play guy. If you look at his lines, he's had like 4 100-yard games, but with every week that he's had a 100-yard game, he's only had like 3 catches. But when you're only throwing the ball 8 times a game or whatever they're doing, if he has 3 catches, he's getting the majority of the passes. So if Auburn's going to have to throw the ball, who are they looking at? They're looking at Coates. So, yeah, that's why I like him. I think they're going to have to throw the ball. And Georgia's not going to go quietly into the night on this one. I think it's going to be a tough game for Auburn to win. I actually think Georgia's going to win this game in Auburn. And that's not just speaking as a fan. I just think that Todd Gurley's back. Bennett's been pretty impactful, not as impactful as Gurley has been. But yeah, it's going to be a fun game to watch. So I'm not rostering Trey Mason though.
Okay.
Sorry.
Fair.
I really went on a rabbit trail on that one. I'm sorry. Trey Mason was a question. My bad.
It's okay. We understand. Who are some other?
We're learning.
Yeah. We are taking notes. Who are some other guys that you really like as far as a wide receiver position, Ben?
Yeah, there's the expensive guys we talked about. Goodley. There's Richardson facing Cal, which is the dream matchup whenever you're looking at wide receivers facing Cal. You always want to play whoever you can, and Richardson's a stud. Even with the whatever his name is for Colorado, who isn't very good, but he can get the ball enough to Richardson because he's so talented that Richardson can do some stuff. I think that game is going to be kind of risky, even though that there's going to be some points scored. It's just going to be tough to kind of gauge. At 16.3K, he's expensive. I like Allen Robinson, A-Rob at 13.6 against Purdue. Purdue's shown that they've pretty much given up on the season. I've kind of tried to push some of their plays lately with Yancey and whatever, but they're just done. It's over. And I like him. I like Green if you're using Winston. I'm just looking over my rankings right now. We talked about Coates. Phillips has scored a touchdown the past 5 games. At the middle tier, and it actually think that there's a lot of value in this cheap tier as we go under 7K or right out 7K. Absolutely love Kenny Lawler. If you get a chance, go on to Twitter or go on to Google, whatever your search engine of choice is, and Google Kenny Lawler and look up some of these catches he's had. I tried to find a GIF to put into the article so that we could kind of see some of these catches, but he's made 2 catches this year that I was just blown away with. And he's 6'3", but he's little, he's fast, can get behind defenses. Like him a lot. He's just a freshman and he's really come on lately, and Cal has really started to use him, and they're targeting him a lot. So yeah, and with they don't have a running game. We talked about that. So yeah, I like him, and we talked about Norwood, and Devin Smith is really cheap. And Devin Smith, you'll have to refresh me, Davis. Is Devin Smith really cheap on FanDuel too? I think he is. He's 5.9 on DraftStreet, and he's facing Illinois. So if you want to go with the 3-headed monster of Devin Smith, Hyde, and Braxton Miller, I'm all about. I think
and I love Devin Smith every week. I started him that game with Geaton where he had the 2 touchdowns in the first quarter. So I've loved him ever since then. He's definitely not as consistent as Corey Brown, but yeah, he's always a cheap wide receiver option that I like to throw in there.
Very nice.
Yep.
Well, I think we have it covered. If you have any questions for us in the chat, feel free to ask them. We have a couple already. We have, let's see, Cochran or Marquise Williams. That's from Mav as a QB2.
Yeah, and Marquise Williams. If you can kind of deal with the salary problems, I would go Marquise Williams. Cochran, we talked about it, and Kalani when we bantered back and forth on Twitter, we brought up a nice point. He's 10 points. You can chalk it up. 10 points. That's what you're going to get. He's 3K. You're going to at least get 10 points. If he gets 2+ touchdowns and racks up some yards, then you're looking at a guy who's going to be 15 plus and maybe even 20. If he gets 20 points, you just set your lineup perfectly, as long as you're smart with all the other money plays. So he's definitely more risky. Marquise Williams can do it all. We saw last week. I wonder if he can replicate that again. Is the only thing I question as he's playing on the road. But yeah, I like him a lot better than Bryn Renner was. So what do you think, Davis?
Say that again. I was setting lineups on FanDuel.
Of course you are. Of course you are. Cochran, who we talked about with UConn, who's facing at SMU, or Marquise Williams, who's at Pitt.
Oh, Williams, dude. He's gonna blow up tomorrow. You guys seriously put him in, especially on FanDuel where it's only 4 points for passing touchdowns. Please, just put him in. He's gonna get you like 35.
Whoa, I don't know about 35. Jeez.
Well, it's 6
He's
points
really good
for a passing touchdown.
Not on FanDuel.
No, it's 4 points. But Davis is obviously thinking he's going to throw for a touchdown, run for a touchdown, and catch a touchdown again this week.
No, I think he's gonna throw for 1 and run for 2.
Ooh, okay. I mean, if he thinks that that's going to happen, if Davis thinks that's going to happen, then yeah, he could approach the 35-point mark. I see we have a question of Kelvin Taylor against South Carolina. What are you laughing at?
Please go.
Vanderbilt crushed Kelvin Taylor. He did get in the end zone twice, but man, he looked bad against Vanderbilt.
No, you see, you're kind of looking at this in a box of how bad Florida's offense has been, and the fact that Kelvin Taylor is not bad. I'm still convinced that Kelvin Taylor is talented. It's just the fact that their offense
hurdles in a Texas State semifinal.
He totally ran it. He won a race at a county fair one time.
Slip and slide champion 2012. I realize this. Do you like him or not? Yes or no?
No, I like him. If he's cheap, I like him. He was kind of one of those guys that hit the cutting block when I was finishing up my rankings. But even at South Carolina, if you assume that Morton Wig is going to be a dual threat and South Carolina is going to have to contain that, if they run the ball a lot, if they decide to run the ball, if he gets 20 carries or so, and South Carolina hasn't been devastating against the run, I could see him doing well. So yeah, if he's cheap and you need the money to do other things with it, I could understand. I'm not going to say don't do it.
Well, there you have it. I am watching so much money slip away.
On NBA,
these late games right now, man. It sucks.
Oh,
man. What's going on? What's going on? Who
basically Memphis and LA are going back and forth, and Josh Smith is going nuts for Detroit, and I don't
groan.
KCP, and that's it. That's the only exposure I have. It is brutal. Let's see.
I have this week's Capri Bibbs, by the way.
Give it to us.
Woo!
He's only 6K. I'm barely playing any of the early only slate. Normally I load up on the early only slate on FanDuel, but the late slate is so good that I'm saving most of my roll for it. Jared Lawson, he plays for San Jose State. He's only 6K on the late slate, and they play Nevada, which was the defense that just gave up 300 yards and 4 touchdowns to Bibbs last week. You want him in so hard.
Yeah, we talk about Jared Lawson just about every week, it seems like. But yeah, he's a stud play. I like him at Nevada, especially if San Jose State's going to blow that game out. But I think Capri Bibbs for that late game slate, who that guy's going to be. Do you know who it is, Kitchen?
I do not.
It's Capri Bibbs.
Yeah, I've got those are the two I have in. I'm going to be playing the late game slate. Like I'm gonna be all in because those.
Do you not worry though about the run that they got the previous week? I mean, you remember what happened with is it Terry Bennett, the guy from Army?
Baggett.
That's who it was.
Oh yeah, that sucked.
The next week, everybody thought he doesn't had a gym, and
it's different with Terry Baggett. Is that he was kind of sharing carries, whereas Capri Bibbs is pretty much knocked Chris Nwuke out of any chance of sharing carries. So yeah, it's Bibbs' job, and New Mexico's like bottom 5 against.
No, they're the worst. They're the bottom.
Yeah, they might have been bottom 5 before last week.
But Colorado State isn't very good against the run either, and Casey Carrier's on the other side of the ball. And David and I know how much money Casey Carrier can make you if you play him at a cheap price, and 6.6K is pretty.
Colorado State is 23rd best against running backs.
Yeah, but their defense is soft. Their defense is soft.
I think their pass defense is softer than their run defense.
Well, what does that matter? New Mexico's not going to pass on them, so they're going to run.
They actually do have in my tournament lineup. I actually do have one of their wide receivers in because I'm sick and I just like setting money on fire.
Okay.
So they have this guy who caught 2 touchdowns the one game where they threw the ball over 20 times, and I have him in because Colorado State's pass defense is really bad.
Yeah, it's bad.
Yeah, it's bad. So that will do it, guys. Davis, tell people where they can reach you.
At Davis Mattek. That's my handle on everything.
At
literally everything.
Davis Mattek, and Davis again does NBA stuff for us on FantasyInsiders.com. Ben, your Twitter handle is
at Natural Slugger with 2 R's.
No, there's not 2 R's. It's just 1 R.
No way.
Slugger. There's actually 2 R's in the actual Natural Slugger.
Right.
name.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, you nailed it. My bad.
Yeah. And you can reach me at Soccer Dave.
If you are under 30 and you're totally cool, then you absolutely know these guys. The Lonely Island and Michael. The Lonely Island!
So that will do it
This is just a blockbuster.
for the show. This has been the Friday Night College Football Show. Ben is making love to the camera. Anyways, find us on Twitter, hit us up, and we'll trying to get the music. The music is not happening.
Fucking Jordan Hill. God damn it.
Yeah, screw that guy. He's about to lose me.
Is he going nuts?
Yeah,
He just outscored Henson, so now a lot of my games are dead.
Okay. Well, that will do it. We'll see you later.
F him. F him. F him to hell.